Have you noticed that love has never been more available, yet never felt more elusive? You live in a time where connection is one swipe away, where the promise of companionship sits in your pocket, glowing against the dark, and yet you often find yourself lonelier than ever. You scroll through endless faces, each one a possibility, each one vanishing just as quickly as it appeared. The paradox is almost cruel. Never before have you been surrounded by so many options, and never before has it been so easy to feel disposable. Picture this, a couple sitting side by side on a couch. The room is quiet, but instead of silence, there is a buzzing tension. Both hold their phones like lifelines, scrolling, tapping, pausing to laugh at something far away, rather than looking at the person inches from them. Their bodies are close, but their worlds are miles apart. That is the shape of modern intimacy, physical proximity, wrapped in emotional distance, a closeness built on fractured attention. Neuroscience has shown how every notification delivers a tiny surge of dopamine, the same chemical that fuels gambling machines. You don't even need to open the message. The mere vibration tricks your brain into believing love might be waiting. And so, you become addicted, not to love itself, but to the anticipation of it. Love, once a steady flame, now flickers like neon lights, flashing and fading, demanding constant stimulation. But underneath this glow lies something quieter, something more haunting. You might notice the ache that follows the scroll, the emptiness after another late-night conversation dissolves into silence, the sting of being left unseen. These are not trivial wounds. They echo deeper fears, the fear that you are not enough, that intimacy is always temporary, that love has become less about being known and more about being consumed. Modern relationships are no longer just about finding a partner. They are about survival in an era where distraction is BT, constant, and attention is currency. You are pulled between craving, intimacy, and fearing its weight. You want to be loved, but you are terrified of being truly seen. And so, you wear masks, you play roles, you drift between shallow waters, hoping to touch something profound. The question you dare not ask is this: if love is everywhere, why does it feel so far away? Perhaps the answer lies not in the apps, not in the messages, not even in the partners you choose, but in the shadows you carry from long before you ever held a phone in your hand. And it is there, in the beginning, where we must turn next. What does it mean to learn love before you even know the word for it? Imagine a small child sitting at the edge of a room. The parent is there close enough to touch, close enough to hear their breathing, yet their eyes never quite meet the child's gaze. Maybe the parent is busy, distracted, carrying the heavy weight of their own unspoken struggles. They provide food, shelter, the routine of care, but the warmth of presence is absent. To a child, this absence does not feel circumstantial. It feels personal. It feels like a quiet confirmation. You are not enough to be chosen. This is where the blueprint is drawn. In the earliest years of life, your nervous system becomes a student of connection. When a caregiver responds with consistency, your body learns safety, your heart learns that love is something steady. But when their love is unpredictable, warm one moment, cold the next, your mind becomes anxious, always scanning for signs of abandonment. And when they are distant, detached, or unresponsive, you adapt by closing off. You learn to survive by needing less, by pretending you are fine without closeness. These are not choices you make. They are patterns that shape you before you even speak. Attachment theory explains this with 4 styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. They are not abstract labels, but living imprints etched into your nervous system. An anxious child clings, desperate for reassurance. An avoidant child turns inward, creating a mask of independence. A disorganized child oscillates between both, caught in confusion. All of this becomes the silent script you carry into adulthood, a script written long before you had the chance to question it. Think of that child again, reaching out for affection. Their small hand extends, hoping to be held, but it meets air, silence, or distracted eyes. That moment seems fleeting, but to the child it is eternal. It plants the belief that love must be earned, chased, or feared. Years later, as an adult, you find yourself replaying the same script, seeking partners who echo that familiar absence, confusing inconsistency for passion, or mistaking withdrawal for strength. The tragedy is that you do not remember this consciously. It does not come to you as a memory, but as a feeling. The sudden ache when someone doesn't text back, the panic when love feels uncertain, the cold armor you wear when intimacy grows too close. What you think is a modern problem is often an ancient echo, the child within you, still waiting for someone to look up, to notice, to choose them. And so the patterns of your relationships are not born in the present, they are the shadows of your past. To understand why love feels so fragile today, you must return to those first lessons, to the moments when your heart first learned whether it was safe to open or safer to close. And from there, you will see how these childhood blueprints harden into the masks you now wear as an adult. Have you ever wondered why, as an adult, you feel compelled to hide parts of yourself from the very people you long to be closest to? It is because, long ago, you learned that love was not given freely. It had to be managed, negotiated, performed. And so, without realizing it, you put on a mask. Not the kind made of cloth or porcelain, but one woven out of charm, silence, control, or self-erasure. Each mask whispers the same promise. If I wear this, maybe I will be safe. Maybe I will be loved. At first, it feels natural. You become the performer, always giving, always smiling, always anticipating the needs of others before they are even spoken. Beneath the applause lies exhaustion, because the performance is endless and no one ever pauses to ask what you truly want. Or you become the ghost, disappearing at the first sign of intimacy, retreating into silence when someone gets too close. To others, you appear distant or indifferent, but beneath that detachment lies the trembling fear of being hurt again. And then there is the controller, the one who clings to power in order to avoid the chaos of vulnerability. Love becomes less about connection and more about managing outcomes, ensuring that you are never the one abandoned. Modern life makes these masks even easier to wear. The smartphone in your hand becomes your stage, your shield, your weapon. You curate your profile, choosing which angles are acceptable, which truths are too raw to show. You leave messages on read, knowing the silence will speak louder than words. You ghost someone not because you don't care, but because you care too much and fear what will happen if you stay. The screen protects you, but it also imprisons you, turning every gesture of love into a performance rehearsed for an unseen audience. Neuroscience tells us that the brain adapts to patterns of safety and danger, rehearsing them like scripts. Each time you hide behind a mask, your nervous system records it as survival. Over time, you may forget that the mask was ever a choice. It becomes fused to your identity, and you start to wonder if the self beneath it even exists. And yet, the mask never fully silences the ache. You feel it in the quiet moments, when the applause fades, when the conversation ends, when the screen goes dark. You sense the child beneath, still waiting to be loved without disguise. But, instead of peeling away the mask, you tighten it, fearing that the rawness beneath is unworthy of being seen. The tragedy of love in disguise is that it keeps you hidden even from those who want to know you. And so relationships become masquerade balls, painted smiles meeting painted smiles, intimacy reduced to shadows dancing on a wall. The question is not whether you wear a mask, but whether you are willing to remember who you are without it. And to answer that, you must look deeper into the science of how desire itself is shaped and distorted. Why does love feel so powerful one moment and so fragile the next? Beneath the poetry of your heart, beneath the stories you tell yourself about fate and soulmates, there is something quieter, something biological, the theatre of your brain, where chemicals play out the mechanics of desire. Love may feel like mystery, but it is also circuitry, a storm of signals guiding who you long for, who you chase, and who you leave behind. Every time your phone lights up with a new match, your brain releases dopamine. It is the same chemical that lights up when a gambler pulls a lever on a slot machine, uncertain if this spin will deliver a prize. The uncertainty is the hook, not knowing who might appear, who might reply, who might vanish. Your nervous system becomes addicted not to connection itself, but to the anticipation of it. This is why hours slip away while you scroll, swipe, and wait. You are chasing not love, but the rush of possibility. And then, when closeness does form, another chemical enters the stage, oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It is released when you hug, when you hold hands, when you make love. It tells your body, you are safe here, you can trust this person. But oxytocin is fragile. When trust is broken through betrayal, rejection, or even constant distraction, the bond fractures, and your nervous system records intimacy as danger rather than safety. This is why one betrayal can echo louder than 100 moments of tenderness. Psychologists have also uncovered the paradox of choice. When faced with too many options, satisfaction declines. In relationships, this paradox grows sharper. When you believe there is always someone else one swipe away, commitment weakens. You start to wonder if the person sitting across from you is truly the one, or just the one you happen to pause on. Desire becomes restless, not because love is absent, but because your mind is flooded with the illusion of endless alternatives. And while you sit in the glow of these possibilities, your attention fractures. Studies show that even the silent presence of a smartphone on the table reduces the depth of conversation and intimacy. The device does not need to ring, it only needs to remind you that the world of distraction is always within reach. Your partner feels the shift even if they cannot name it, the subtle withdrawal of your full presence, the sense that you are with them but not truly there. Love, then, is not just a matter of the heart. It is the choreography of chemicals, the scripts of psychology, the constant negotiation between safety and risk, attention and distraction. You are not weak for feeling caught in this dance. You are human. But the question remains, when these storms of desire turn restless and unstable, what shadows do they cast? What happens when the very forces that were meant to bond you begin to pull you apart? What happens when the very tools meant to bring you closer become the instruments of your loneliness? Modern love promises connection at the touch of a screen, yet it often delivers silence more piercing than words. You know the feeling staring at your phone, waiting for a reply that never comes. Hours stretch into days, and what was once hope transforms into humiliation. This is ghosting, the modern vanishing act, where someone slips away without a trace, leaving you to wrestle not only with absence, but with the cruel suggestion that you never mattered at all. Sometimes it is not total disappearance, but something subtler, more insidious, breadcrumbing. Tiny crumbs of attention scattered just enough to keep you following, but never enough to lead you to real nourishment. A late-night text, a half-hearted compliment, a promise of someday that never arrives. You keep walking that path, hungry for closeness, yet always starving. Psychologists describe this cycle as intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that keeps gamblers hooked to slot machines. The unpredictability of love becomes addictive, even as it corrodes you. Then there are the hot and cold lovers, the ones who invite you in with warmth only to push you back into the cold. One moment, their affection burns like fire, and the next it dies as if winter itself entered the room. This push and pull awakens old wounds in your nervous system, triggering the anxious child still longing to be chosen. You mistake volatility for passion, chaos for chemistry. But in reality, you are dancing with someone who thrives on power, who measures love in distance, who confuses control with care. The pursuit of the perfect partner deepens this shadow. Technology offers you endless faces, endless illusions of choice, and with that abundance comes disposability. When someone stumbles, when they reveal a flaw, when the glow fades, they are discarded like yesterday's message thread. You are left haunted by the paradox. The closer technology brings you, the further your heart drifts from true intimacy. The ease of replacing others makes it harder to stay, harder to forgive, harder to see love as anything more than a temporary exchange. These patterns take a toll far greater than you realize. Loneliness here does not feel like empty rooms. It feels like being surrounded by people who are not really present. It is the silent erosion of trust, the slow hollowing out of hope. You begin to wonder if love itself has lost its meaning, if intimacy is no longer possible in a world built on convenience and performance. And yet, the shadow always points back to the light it conceals. To understand why these patterns grip you so tightly, you must step outside your private ache and look at the larger story, how culture itself has trained you to accept these distorted forms of love, rewarding your masks and punishing your authenticity. Have you ever stopped to wonder whose script you are following when you fall in love? Long before you write your own story, you are handed a script, shaped not by your heart but by the culture that surrounds you. From the moment you are a child, stories tell you what love should look like. Hollywood romances promise that passion will burn eternally, that the right person will complete you, that grand gestures and dramatic reunions are the proof of devotion. These myths become the background music of your imagination, and when reality fails to match the soundtrack, you assume the failure must be yours. Later, the script shifts. Instagram couples pose like brands, carefully curated to show only perfection. Their vacations, their smiles, their staged intimacy create the illusion that love is not simply lived, but displayed. You measure your own relationship against these filtered images, and even moments of genuine closeness begin to feel inadequate, as though intimacy must be broadcast to be real. Love is transformed into performance, authenticity replaced with aesthetics. Society also imposes its milestones, the checklist of marriage, children, and stability. You are told that these markers define success, that love is not love unless it conforms to an acceptable timeline. If you are single, you are pitied. If you do not marry, you are questioned. And if your relationship falters, you are judged. This conditioning does not only shape your choices, it invades your sense of worth, whispering that your value is tied to your ability to fulfill the role assigned to you. Philosophers have long warned of this quiet theft. Simone de Beauvoir spoke of how love can become an act of possession, where the beloved is turned into the other, an object of validation rather than a partner in freedom. Erich Fromm warned that in modern times, love has become a commodity, something to be marketed, consumed, and discarded once its shine fades. In this world, intimacy risks becoming less about knowing another person and more about acquiring them, as though they are a product you purchase to confirm your identity. And so, without realizing it, you inherit patterns that are not entirely yours. You chase the cinematic high, you compare your quiet moments to curated illusions, you treat milestones as proof of success rather than as choices of the heart. The tragedy is not that these scripts exist, it is that you rarely stop to question them. You live them as though they are inevitable, forgetting that they are inventions, stories written by others for purposes that may not align with your truth. But when those scripts run thin, when the roles feel suffocating and the images hollow, you begin to sense the weight of what has been stolen from you. And it is then that you must ask, what has been the true cost of living by these borrowed stories, and what scars remain when love bends beneath their pressure? What happens to a heart that learns to survive on fragments of love? At first, it aches, Then it adapts. And finally, it begins to wither in silence. Modern relationships, with all their promises of endless connection, often leave you staring at an empty screen, waiting for a message that never arrives. Each second of silence is not just absence, it is rejection carved into time. Your nervous system interprets it as danger, your chest tightens, and anxiety blooms like a fire you cannot put out. Imagine this. Someone sits in the dark after a breakup, the glow of their phone reflecting tears they never show to anyone. The world sees them moving forward, smiling, at work, nodding through conversations, but when the night comes, they scroll endlessly, not searching for joy, but for something, anything, to fill the void. The loneliness becomes unbearable, yet they mask it with curated posts, convincing others and themselves that they are fine. This is how pain hides in plain sight. Studies confirm what you feel, but rarely say. Loneliness today is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Rates of depression and anxiety climb not because people are physically isolated, but because they are emotionally disconnected, even while surrounded by others. You can be in a crowded room or lying beside a partner and still feel unseen. This is the silent epidemic, not of broken bodies, but of fractured bonds. Long-term relationships are not immune. Sometimes, the love that began as fire turns transactional, reduced to routines and obligations. You find yourself sharing space with someone who no longer looks at you with wonder, but with indifference. The intimacy once alive becomes a contract, silently signed. You play your role, I play mine, and we do not disturb the fragile peace. In that numbness, you may wonder which is worse, being abandoned or being invisible while staying. Psychology tells us that rejection activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. This is why heartbreak feels like your chest is being torn open, why silence burns like a wound. Yet, unlike physical pain, this suffering is harder to name, harder to treat, and easier to dismiss. You carry it like a shadow, believing it is normal, while it quietly erodes your spirit. And so, millions wander through life, haunted by an emptiness they cannot quite explain. The epidemic is not written on faces, but in the unseen tears, the restless scrolling, the hollow smiles. You learn to endure it, but deep down, you long for something more. Not performance, not fragments, but presence. The question is whether healing is possible in a world that rewards distraction and disposability. To answer that, you must turn toward the fragile hope of restoration, toward the practices that water the garden of love before it dies completely. What if the love you seek is not something to be found, but something to be reclaimed within yourself? The wounds of fractured relationships often leave you believing that healing will arrive in the form of another person, someone who finally sees you, finally stays. Yet the truth is more haunting and more hopeful. No one can remove the mask for you. You must be the one who dares to take it off. Picture a garden left unattended. At first, the soil is still rich, the flowers still bloom, but over time weeds creep in, the earth hardens, and what once was alive begins to wither. Modern love often feels like this, unattended, distracted, left on autopilot. But the garden is not dead, it is waiting. Healing begins when you return to it, when you touch the soil of your own heart with presence instead of performance. Mindful communication is the water that softens this soil. When you speak, not to win or defend, but to reveal yourself, something shifts. Studies in psychology show that vulnerability builds trust faster than perfection ever could. To admit, I am afraid, or I feel unseen, is not weakness, but courage. Neuroscience confirms that empathy reshapes the brain, releasing oxytocin, rebuilding bonds that once felt broken. Presence, not performance, is what nourishes intimacy. Boundaries too are a form of care. They are not walls to keep love out, but fences that protect the fragile shoots of self-worth. You are not selfish for saying no, for asking to be treated with respect, for refusing to chase crumbs. Attachment theory reminds us that secure bonds are built not on sacrifice, but on reciprocity, two people holding one another without erasing themselves. And then there is shadow work, the quiet act of sitting with the child you once were, the one who reached out for love and met only silence. Healing does not erase their pain, but it offers them the one thing they never received: acknowledgement. To look into that shadow and whisper, "You were always enough," is to break the cycle that has echoed through every failed intimacy. When you begin to see your worth as something unshaken by rejection, you remove the suffocating mask. You stop performing for approval and start breathing in the freedom of authenticity. Love, then, ceases to be a desperate search and becomes a meeting place, two gardens tended, two selves unmasked, each choosing to stand in presence rather than illusion. The path is not easy, but it is possible, and when you walk it, you discover that the very fractures which once made love feel impossible can become the openings through which light enters. From here, the question is no longer how to find love, but how to live it not as a performance, but as a truth that endures. What if love is not about finding the perfect other, but about learning to be fully present with the imperfect self? You spend so much of your life searching outward, through glowing screens, through fleeting conversations, through the endless parade of faces, that you forget love is not discovered in the distance, but in the stillness of your own presence. The truth that feels hardest to accept is also the simplest. Intimacy begins not when another chooses you, but when you choose to arrive in your own life without disguise. Think of all the masks you have worn. The performer who gave too much, the ghost who disappeared, the controller who clung to certainty. Each mask was a survival strategy, a shield against rejection. And yet, beneath each one, the same longing whispered, to be seen without defense, to be loved without condition. That longing was never foolish. It was the most human part of you, the child within who refused to stop reaching even when silence answered back. Philosophers have always reminded us of this paradox. Carl Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. Erich Fromm wrote that love is not merely a feeling, but an art, something you cultivate through discipline, presence, and care. And Rumi, centuries before, whispered, "Your task is not to seek for love, but to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." These voices across time converge on one truth. Love is not a miracle to stumble upon. It is a practice, a courage, a daily act of unmasking. Imagine standing before someone you love, not with your walls, not with your performances, but simply with yourself. There is fear in that, the fear of rejection, of being deemed unworthy. But there is also liberation, because only when you step out from the shadows of expectation can love become more than transaction. It becomes a meeting of souls, imperfect but present, fragile yet enduring. The modern world makes this harder, yes. Distraction tempts you, illusions seduce you, culture hands you scripts that do not fit. But none of these erase the possibility of love that is real. Such love does not burn with constant fireworks. It is quieter, like a candle in a dark room, steady enough to guide you home. It does not promise perfection, it offers presence. And in that presence, you discover that love has always been less about being chosen and more about daring to choose yourself, to choose another, to choose again and again despite the shadows. So perhaps the final question is this: will you keep hiding behind masks, waiting for flawless love, or will you step forward, imperfect and unguarded, into the raw, enduring light of love that has no disguise?